Oh hey, and welcome back to the studio. I get a lot of questions like, Brandon, how do you make electronic music? And it is a lot easier to create music, digital music, more than ever. And I simply use a computer and a keyboard controller, which I will get to here in a minute. But the old way of creating electronic music was accumulating a lot of actual physical instruments. And I do sort of have a physical instrument here, but what I mean by that is you have a lot of artists that have keyboards. This is actually a keyboard controller, which I will go into more detail here in a second, but it doesn't actually create sound itself. It's not an actual synthesizer. It doesn't produce sound. I actually just plug that into the computer in order to work with the software that I use. But back to the equipment, artists would use actual keyboards, keyboard synthesizers. They would use items called drum machines. So these drum machines would actually have pre-programmed samples of like kick drums, claps, hi-hats, for instance, and then they would program the drums in that machine. And then they would use a synthesizer, maybe. They might have another synthesizer for a bass. They may have another synthesizer for a melody. And then you'd have the drum machine. They may also use what's called a sampler. And a sampler may have pre-programmed sounds. May have some additional drum sounds, but they could also record their own sounds. And go out into the field and record some sounds, could be even sounds of nature, and then create like a one-note hit of that sound and use it in their compositions. And then they would use something called a sequencer, which is what would arrange all of these sounds produced in these individual instruments. And they painstakingly piece these things together throughout these various instruments. They may also record it live as well. I remember as a kid, creating digital music was pretty new when I was in my teenage years. And I kind of had a good idea of how these electronic music artists were creating music, like thinking of artists like the Chemical Brothers or Crystal Method or Left Field, some of my favorite artists at the time, even maybe Fatboy Slim. And I just thought, I was like, holy crap. I was like, at the time, these guys you probably had a minimum at the time spend about $5K, God, maybe even $10K in equipment in order to create full sounding arrangements. And I remember as a kid thinking there's got to be some type of digital software that existed. And now we're talking about like the early 2000s at the time, and this digital software actually did exist, because I couldn't, as a kid, I was not even in college at the time, not even a poor college student yet, just a kid. And I was thinking it would take some time to piece this equipment together, and there's got to be something more efficient. And that software did exist, but it was quite in its infancy. There were programs called Rebirth that I used. I used a program called Acid, but that was only simply just these sample sounds that you sequenced and arranged. And if you're familiar with a software like Final Cut Pro, it was kind of like using Final Cut Pro but using just sound clips, and I created music that way. But it was also very limited because I was limited by the samples that you had available, and you had to purchase those samples as well. But somewhere along the line, I was introduced to a piece of software. Let me open it up for you without messing up this camera flow. This software, it's gonna boot up here in the background, called Fruity Loops. And you're not gonna see a whole lot there, and that's okay. This program called Fruity Loops, and whenever I opened it up, I didn't know what the hell to do and like how to get started, but I kind of figured it out myself. And this was before YouTube tutorials, and I just essentially just kind of reverse engineered it myself. I wasn't gonna take a look at the user's manual because I've got a fine case of undiagnosed ADHD, but I was able to eventually get to some point of creating, my own individual tracks out of this program, and I've gotten a lot out of it, but I probably even to this day have barely scratched the surface. Now, somewhere at that time, probably mid 2000s, the software, pieces of software like this weren't taken so seriously. But then a couple of artists that you may have heard of, if you listen to EDM at all, Deadmau5 and Avicii came out with some tracks that were actually played on the radio, that were actually, some top 40 hits, and they were kind of the breakthrough guys that were able to put some music created out of this software on the map, and actual producers were starting to take this stuff seriously. And I mean, I'm telling you, you can produce professional level music on these pieces of software now these days, especially here in 2025. I've stuck with this program since then as a teenager, but really all you need is this. Probably all you need is a laptop to install the software on, but I'm gonna go down here underneath this horrible set of wires right here. That's probably a fire hazard. That's right, boys and girls, that is a Gateway computer that my friend Jonathan gave it to me actually. It's probably like 14 or 15 years ago. And I use this keyboard controller right here, and all that keyboard does is just interface with the software. It doesn't create individual sounds itself. But what it does is allow me to play through the software, and I can actually go into the software, and I've got hundreds of instruments within the software, hundreds of different types of sounds, and then each individual sound can be manipulated. So if you have any type of knowledge in sound engineering, you've got a playground. And yeah, that's all you need. You need a keyboard, the software, a computer, and I stick with this particular computer that hasn't been upgraded past Windows 7 because and it's also off the internet, so I have limited distractions. And so when I open up this computer, boot it up, I'm solely focused on the music creation process. So that's pretty much it. You have just those three things and maybe a little bit knowledge in music, but this day and age, you can just pick up a YouTube tutorial on music theory and the program FL Studio itself, and you can start making music within a couple of days. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.